So one more thing, and we're back. It's COMP213 lesson 12, part 4. And one thing we didn't cover is this idea of an image gallery. So we covered this drop-down menu. Now they kind of do it differently in the book, and there's different ways of doing it, like the way I did it. I just find that way is the most efficient, the way I've done it, right? But here's one that we didn't cover. It's the Css Image Gallery. Now, something to note. There's a couple of objects here. One is that you have a thumbnail on the left, right? Thumbnail with a width and a height of whatever. You can set these widths and heights inside your CSS, right? And then a span that you wrap around the actual photo image. Here's my photo image itself. Now the photo image itself is 400 by 300, whatever it is. So what I do is I say this. Well, any span, right, as an example, in my gallery, right? So I tag the whole thing as a gallery, right? It's inside my div tag, it has gallery. So any span that's in my gallery, I want to change my positioning to absolute, and then I change my left positioning to -1000, right? -1000. So what this does is it sends the whole thing spiraling to the left, like all kinds, right? So you can't see it, it's off screen, just like we did for our menu, right? And the same thing goes for our hover. When you hover over the gallery, right? Hover over a link that's in the gallery. Hover over the link that contains a span that's in the gallery. So we're targeting a span, right? Which is this span right here, right? And with the parent A tag, here's the parent A tag right here. If I hover over an A tag that contains a span, that span tag is going to have an absolute positioning, just like we do here, but the top and left are going to be position the image exactly where it's supposed to go, and with the text align of center. So it's going to be off screen, and then when you hover over it, pap, it's going to be on screen. That's the trick to making a CSS image gallery with no JavaScript whatsoever. Okay, we've done a lot of stuff without JavaScript, but how do we make JavaScript work? And what the hell is JavaScript anyway? So one thing to note is that JavaScript is the scripting language or the programming language of the web. And there are quite a few ways of including JavaScript in our code. Let's go back to Visual Studio for a second. I'm going to close off my CSS because we're going to do a little bit different lesson here. If you notice, I have right now linked into my document, I have a couple of CSS sheets right here, right? And for JavaScript to come into play, I can do JavaScript in a couple of ways. I can include JavaScript, right, in its own script tag. So I can do one of these, script. And I could write something like, you know, I can describe things that are missing in the JavaScript. Like, for example, what type of, you know, JavaScript is there? What kind of script is it? If for example, I can specify my type is text JavaScript. I could say that. So when I specify this, anything that I put, any script that I put between these two tags, between these script tags, would actually be a piece of JavaScript. Now JavaScript looks very similar to, it's a C-influenced language that's loosely typed. So I don't have to actually define the type of JavaScript. But let's say, for example, I have a value in my JavaScript. I'm going to declare a var, a variable, right? And my variable is going to be called sum. And my sum is going to be 10, let's say. Well, I can define that variable here in the code, right? So let's go Control S for save. Here's my sum. Now I want to spit out this sum, right? I want to spit out this sum somewhere inside my file here. I want to be able to inject content using JavaScript inside my document. Well, one thing we need to know is the document itself is a node, right? And the way things work, if we look at the document itself, it has each of these objects here, the body tag, the header tag, the nav tag. And let's picture each of these objects as a node, right? Therefore, the document object model is what it's called. The document itself is the outer document that contains, the HTML document that contains everything. That's the document. I can traverse objects inside the document with JavaScript. JavaScript allows me to traverse up and down the DOM, the document object model, right, by you know, targeting certain elements. And usually I can do things like get element by ID. I can say, hey, I want to declare a value right? For example, I want to make a reference to my document, and I want to put this value of the sum of 10, I want to put it somewhere. Right? I want to take my 10 value and put it somewhere. Well, this is how it works. If I want to target my CSS, see this one here, it says CSS transform example, right? And here's my main content, right? Here's my main content. So if I want to kill, or I want to put something, I want to target a piece of ID, like let's say I give my H2 tag here an ID of first heading, right? Or let's just call this headline. How about this, headline? So my ID is headline. I can use JavaScript. To target my, when the DOM is loaded, I can target my headline tag, right, by using something like this. I can say something like this, document dot get element by ID, and I can specify my string for the element ID, which would be, as an example, headline. Right? Now that's what I can do. That's what it's there, right, with a semicolon. But what I want to do is I want to declare a variable. I can say something like this. I want to make a reference to my headline, right, which is, I want to get by using the document model, get element by ID. I want to take the headline element and put it inside my headline variable. Okay, cool. Once I've made a reference to it and I got a sum of 10, I can do something like this. I can say headline then dot, right, inner HTML, right, is equal to sum. Right? Inner HTML means the inner node, the inner content of my headline tag. My headline tag then is this one. I'm using this to target. Here's my headline tag, right? And my inner HTML is this. And remember, we talked about everything being a node. Even the content is a node. So let's think about all the hierarchy inside my document object model. I have my header. Inside my header, I have a navbar. Inside my navbar, I have a span. Inside my span, I have other spans, right? Next to them, I have a UL, an unordered list. Inside my unordered list, I have a list item. Inside my list item, I have an anchor tag. Inside my anchor tag, I have the home text. This is the inner HTML inside of my anchor tag, right? The actual text inside my object. Okay, so that's what I'm targeting. I'm saying, take my headline, get the element by ID. I'm looking at the headline element, headline 2, which I've tagged as an ID of headline, right? Get this thing, make a reference to it. That's what this is. This is the reference. It's pointing at that object in the document. And then use the inner HTML method or property and assign it to the value of sum, which is 10. Let's see if that works. May not, because we haven't told it when to do this. All right, first of all, let's us refresh this thing. And you see how there's nothing changed here. Right? Let's look at the JavaScript inspector. I'm going to go to more tools, and I'm going to go to JavaScript Console and see what it gives us in a JavaScript. It says uncaught type error, cannot set property of inner HTML of null. Right? Because right now what's happening is it can't find this thing called, it's giving me an error though, it's trying to find this inner HTML of the H2 element, right? Here's my headline. And if I go here, it's called headline. Now, again, if I go get element by ID, I'm making a reference to this thing, it's my headline. And if I go to one of these, headline, let's see if this is the thing that it needs, right? Do I need to put in my hashtag headline? You got to be careful here for what it looks like, right? Let's look and see if this is the problem. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back out here and refresh. And let's see if I'm still getting this inner HTML of it's giving me an error. This is what JavaScript does. It gives us some feedback, right? It says my anonymous function, I'm trying to get my inner HTML of my ID, my document, my get element by ID. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. Headline, so I'm making a reference to this, right? If I want to print this out, let's say instead of doing this, headline.innerHTML, if I want to print out this to console, I can do something like this. And by the way, you'd be forgiven to think right? Forgiven to think that this right here would work because it's going to try and traverse the DOM and get at this thing here. It's going to try and load this JavaScript before the page renders. Now the page hasn't rendered yet, and it's trying to access the JavaScript, trying to access this element. So this is where it's safer to put my JavaScript at the bottom of my page. Let's try this. So I'm going to X out of this one. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of my page, below the footer, and before the body, and drop my JavaScript in there. See if that works. Now, or remember, we talked about order being important. Would that be the cause of my issue? Now, you don't know what I'm doing, because I'm just putting in some random code here that looks like. But let's take a look here. First, let's take this headline thing off, right? And let's see what I get now when I do my, when I try and do this, right? So again, I've taken away this stuff and I've put my JavaScript down here. Let's just do a couple things. I want to do before I do that, I want to kind of put a console.log. Let's put this in there for me. So console.log, and I want to target my headline tag, the one I just made, the headline, a reference to my headline, and see what I get. What am I getting when I target my headline? And I want to refresh. All right, there's 10. Hey, look at the 10. 10 have appeared now. And now I'll tell you why. The order was important, right? So I'm going to go here. Watch this. I'm going to go here to More Tools and JavaScript Console. And when I do that, I get this, right? This is my inner HTML. My headline, when I target my headline, it actually feeds me back this. It tells me what that this value sum is going to be put back in here. Yeah? So I'm injecting that content onto my page by saying this. First, I create a reference to the document, and I'm getting my element. I'm looking for my element that has an ID of headline. Here it is. And I'm looking at its inner HTML, which is right here. And why is it working here, in this position here, my JavaScript, as opposed to working up here in my head? Well, in my head of my document, where I put it underneath my content, nothing loaded yet, right? So how do I fix this? Well, one thing I know is true. I could do something like this. I want to make sure that my page is ready. So when my page is ready, right? When my page is ready, I want to target a function that I want to call. I can surround this code here, in a function that I call something like change value. So I'm going to change my change headline. Let's call it change headline. So let's write this function. And without knowing JavaScript, this is what something like JavaScript looks like. Function, right? I want to name it change value, right? And inside my code block, I'm going to put all this stuff. Now, you know what functions are like. Functions are like methods. We're learning those in C# right now, right? So I want to be able to call this change value function when the page is loaded. So how do I do that? Well, I can simply go up to my, I'll bring it up in a second. I can simply go here to my body tag. Here's my body tag. And I can say this. On load, when my body tag loads, then call the change value function. Right? That's what this does. So I'm going to call my change value function when my body is loaded. Okay, cool. That's my change value function is down here, in here, my little JavaScript. Now this is bad. I'm doing this inside my page, right? Well, let's see how this works. So I'm going to refresh my page, and I'll refresh it here, and now I still have my 10 in here. Look, here's my 10. So I've changed my value. My heading is now 10, right? To make it a real test, let's make it so it's not 10. It looks like something else. Instead of my sum being 10, this is why when I say JavaScript is loosely typed, let's not call it sum. Let's call this my new value, or new. Let's call it new string. How about new string? My new string is 10, but instead of it being a value like 10, let's make it so it's like this. My new value is my new value, right? Or my new headline. Here's my new headline, right? Here's my new string. Here's my new headline. And of course, headline is still looking for sum. So I got to change this to new string. All right, so now my inner HTML is now new string. I'm still looking to see what my headline is. my inner HTML of my headline is my new string. Here's my new string is my new headline. And you know what? I should change this function from change value to change headline, just to make sure that it makes sense. Right? Change headline. If I change it here, this function, if I rename my function, I've got to rename my event handler up here too to change headline. There's change headline. Okay, cool. So let's try this thing again. So now I want to inject this code this line that says my new headline. Let's try this out. Refresh, or save and refresh. Take a look. So it should say my new headline now. Right? Here and here. Right? So I can inject content inside my code, inside my my object here, by using some simple script within a script tag. The script tag surrounds my JavaScript and tells the browser that my JavaScript, this thing is, I need to use inject this script or run this script in my browser. But this is the thing that I need to do here. I've put it at the bottom of my code. What if I want to take this script again and put it at the top? Will it still work? Well, remember, we added in this onload change headline thing. And I want this thing to fire when my page loads. That's what this onload thing means. So here's this, right? Here's my script. I've made it a function, so I've named it the function change headline, which means it's a named function now. And I'm referring it to it down here, right? But I'm only going to kick off this function when my page loads, which means it'll have content that I can change. Before it was failing because there was no content because the page hadn't rendered yet, and I'm trying to make something change that hasn't been rendered. Now it's going to actually change something because when the page loads, there will be content to change. If I'm right, let's see how it works. So I'm going to save everything and refresh, and now it says my new headline. And if you want to see what that says, let's take a look. I'll go to More Tools, to JavaScript Console, and as you can see it says my new headline. That's the actual stuff that gets rendered. My page has been re-rendered with this object. It doesn't say anymore what I originally wrote in there, which was, if you look at the original headline tag, it said CSS transform example. Look, here's my CSS transform example. Right? But that's not saying that anymore. I'm targeting my headline to rejig what's in that inner HTML to something else. Well, this can be really dangerous. For example, let's say if I target my transformer, right? I want to target my transformer. Here it is. Here's my transformer div tag. What if I do the same thing? What if I say get my ID, which is my transformer, and target my inner HTML? Well, there is no inner HTML for my transformer. There's a p tag. What happens now when I try and target this? Do I actually get this? Let's see. So let's target that instead. So instead of my headline, I want to target my transformer. Here I'm changing this to transformer. So that's my new element ID I'm targeting. And let's see what happens here. So we're going to save this, and I'm going to refresh the page and get ready for wacky stuff. Here's my new headline. Now take a look at this. Right? So it's actually targeted the inner HTML. Here's my transformer, right? It's targeting the inner HTML of that transformer, taking all that text out because my inner HTML is the code, the text that's inside of my headline. In this particular case, the text that sits inside my paragraph tag, which is right here. This text is being replaced because this text, this inner HTML, is being replaced, this whole p tag actually, is being replaced by this. Right? That's what this is doing. Okay, so a very simple example. But the idea here is that what I want to do is I want to be able to target pieces of my page, and I can modify my HTML right that way. The other thing that JavaScript is really great at, right, is I can do stuff like when I hover or when I click on something, I can respond to JavaScript clicks. I can click anywhere on the page, and if I click on that thing, I can cause an event to trigger. Right, so these are the two things that JavaScript is really great at, right? There's a lot of other things too. But let's say, for example, right, I've got this link, right here, my link number 5, right? And I want to target this thing with JavaScript. So when I click on this link, not only will it do this, it'll go here, right? Or maybe not the link, because that link is a little bit too easy. What about if I target my headline tag? I can target anything with JavaScript. So I want to target my headline tag, and on click, when I click on my headline tag, watch this. On click, this is kind of bad to do, but if you can do this. On click, I want to do, I want to transform my text back to normal, right? I want to take this stuff here, this lorem text, and I want to put some of it back. Not the whole thing. I can't put my p tag back so far, but let's try this out. So on click, I want to replace, I'll call this thing called replace paragraph. That's what I'm going to call the function that I'm going to kick off. I don't have this replace paragraph function right now, right? I never wrote the replace paragraph function. But on click, when I click on my headline tag, I'm going to replace this text with what it is. Put it back, basically. Let's check this out. So here I am. Here's my changed headline. Let's make another function. And the new function is going to be called replace paragraph, right? That I'm going to kick off whenever I click on my button. That's going to put back my thing. So I'm going to say this. I'm going to say var, right? And I'm going to target now, instead of a headline, I'm going to target my paragraph. I'm going to call this var paragraph. That's my new variable that I'm creating, right? And I'm going to say that's equal to document.getElementById. And it's going to be called transformer, just like we did last time. I'm targeting my transformer. That's my paragraph. And I'm going to replace my text in there. So I'm going to say headline.innerHTML is equal to, and now I can actually put in a string literal like this. Like this whole string literal. I'm going to put this whole thing back, including the p text. Let's see if I can do this. Copy. And inside my string literal, I'm just going to put this p tag and everything else back like this. Let's see what happens now, right? So that's what the headline.innerHTML, I'm replacing it with this value here. I'm putting this, when I click on it, it's going to kick off this replace paragraph, and if I've done it right, it's going to do this. Okay, let's try this out. And let us run this thing to see if there's any problems. Run. Okay, cool. I don't have any other errors. Now when I click on my headline tag, right, so I click onto it, well, I can't, I'm not clicking there. This is my headline tag. I'll click onto this thing. Oh, what happened? How come it changed my headline tag and not my inner HTML for my p tag? Take a look. My p tag's still there. My transformer is still there. But my headline tag is gone. Right? Well, there's a problem. It did what I asked it to do, by the way. And if I run the page now, it'll show me what I did. Let's just take a look here. Well, headline.innerHTML. Look what I did. I made a mistake. Take a look. I called headline.html, not paragraph.html, and I killed my headline. So let's check this out. Let's go paragraph.innerHTML, because that's what this is, transferring my transformer paragraph. And I'm going to add in this paragraph tag. So I'm going to change it to this. Okay, let's see if I can do this again. So refresh. Let's do a full refresh this time around. All right, kill this one off. And then when I click onto this, it goes back. Now it never comes back. Look, I can never, if I click onto it again, it's not going to toggle. It just changed it back into a paragraph tag. And if I go do a view source, view page source, I actually see a new paragraph tag in here. Take a look. It actually physically puts this paragraph, writes new content right into my tag like this. Paragraph. Take a look. It writes that paragraph tag back in. Before I did that though, let me see if I can, what happens when I don't. If I refresh the page, this is what it looks like, right? And now if I do a view source, let's do a view source now, view page source now. Right, if I go down here, if you notice my paragraph tag is still there, right? But I've re-rendered it, right? I've re-rendered it so that it replaced the information with my new headline. Now I'm just putting the same content back by noting what it is. So JavaScript is a language of the web, and we can use JavaScript to inject content onto the page and create interactivity beyond the scope of what CSS can do for us, far beyond. In fact, we can make full-blown applications, web applications with JavaScript. One thing we didn't mention, which I should, is there's plenty of JavaScript libraries. One of the most popular libraries out there is called Jquery, right? And Jquery allows us to do some of the same things we've done with JavaScript in a much better way. One other thing I should mention as well is that we've done inline JavaScript. This is nice, but I'd like to try and do a file like this, a separate file, which I recommend highly when we do JavaScript, separate and apart from what this is. Well, here's what we're going to do to make this happen. I'm going to go into right-click on my COMP213 project, and I'm going to go Add, and I'm going to add a new folder. Here's my new folder, and my new folder is going to be called Scripts, right? And now what I want to do in my Scripts folder, I want to right-click, and I'm going to add, right, a new JavaScript file. Here's my JavaScript file, right? And my JavaScript file, we're going to call this app.js. This is for my little app that I'm writing, or my main.js. Here it is. It's empty. An empty document comes up, right? Well, I want to take my JavaScript I just wrote, which is these lines, these two functions, without the script tags. I don't want the script tags in there at all. Just this JavaScript stuff, this code. I want to cut it out of here. And I want to go into my app.js, and I'm going to paste it in. Here it is. Here's my JavaScript. Paste it in here. And I'm going to save. Okay, cool. I've got my app.js. But my app.js, and again, it's just the functions here that I've copied over, right? My app.js is a problem. It's not connected to my index.html in any way, right? Just like I connected my CSS documents, I need to connect my JavaScript document. Now, there's two things I can do. I can drag and drop my JavaScript document in here, right? Take a look, like this. And you would be forgiven to think that this is the right position, but it's not. Typical JavaScript these days, unless otherwise you're told, should never be put in the head of your document because this JavaScript has to render, and if there's a problem running this JavaScript, it can make your document not render at all. Therefore, the right place to put JavaScript in this modern web of ours is to take this JavaScript and put it at the bottom of your document, just before the body tag. Right? And also to give a remark like this, some kind of comment that says JavaScript section, just to indicate to the reader what this is. You're just accessing this scripts, this JavaScript script that's outside of our document that exists somewhere else that we're linking to our document, right, in its own file, just like we did with our CSS. And now we can use our JavaScript. I'm just going to clean it up here. We can use our JavaScript in its own file, in its separate document here like this, to make it easier to read and work with, as opposed to working within our own HTML element. And we can access this JavaScript, right, which is just another a script document, from any other HTML document. The same script can be available to any other document by linking it into this one. All right, let's run this thing and see what we can get now that the JavaScript document is linked outside of our other document. So here it is. And I'm going to refresh the page just to make sure that it's there. It's still working, and if I click onto here, it comes back. And let's make sure what we see here, right? So I'm going to go into More Tools, JavaScript Console, and we do have this little thing that works. So it shows me that I've got this element with a p tag, and my p tag, this is my document. I can actually go in there, and that's what's contained in Transformer now, right? Because I've modified my JavaScript, right? And so that's one thing it does in our little inspector here, right? That's one thing. And if I do view source, right, just to check to see that my JavaScript is off and away, here it is, right? It tells me that my JavaScript exists in its own folder. So this is a very high level overview of what JavaScript does. It allows interactivity, and I recommend highly that you put it off your page. Now, JavaScript also has some really cool libraries, and the two of them that I want to introduce you today before we go is jQuery. There's a couple ways to get them. You can go onto the jQuery website like this, jQuery.com. And if I go to jQuery.com, you notice that the latest version of jQuery is 2.1.4. Now, what is jQuery? jQuery is a library of JavaScript functions that are pre-written for you that allow you to give you superpowers, right, when it comes to accessing the DOM, which is the document object model, just like the stuff we talked about before. Different elements on your page I can target with jQuery. Okay, well, there's a couple ways. I can download it from here, right? And when I download this file, I can attach scripts here and link the scripts for jQuery on my document. That's what I could do. Or with Visual Studio, you can right-click on your project and you can go manage NuGet packages. And in Manage NuGet packages, do you see that coming up? You can pull up on the second link here, you can pull up jQuery and you can click Install, like so. When I click Install, it takes the latest version of jQuery and the NuGet package manager fetches it and puts it nicely into this scripts folder. And the reason why I call this folder scripts in the first place was I know Microsoft puts all their scripts inside this scripts folder. Now we have this version of jQuery here, right? This version of jQuery. And if I want to use jQuery instead of regular JavaScript to effect change to my document, I can do something like this. I need to put my jQuery ahead of my app.js file by drag and dropping this jQuery file right here. Here's my jQuery file. I'm drag and dropping it inside my script like this. So now my jQuery, which is this really super special library of JavaScript functions and objects, I've dragged it into my index.html, and now it's available to my app.js because it appears before my app.js. Okay, cool. Now if I want code hinting, if I want tooling, so that I can pull jQuery and I can do jQuery in my document here, in my app.js, I need to make a reference to it by pulling in a reference to it like this. I'm going to drag and drop jQuery now inside this app.js file, like this. And it automatically creates a reference path in jQuery in Visual Studio. Now, instead of using my getElementById, right, I don't have to do that. It's much simpler. It can look like this. I'm just going to put this down here for now and put this inside some comments. And I can do something like this. var headline equals to, here's the jQuery, $, right? And if I say document, right, I can target what I want, right, by looking at the whole document, right? I can do this, and I can look through my document. If you notice, look at all the functions that it comes with. It's loaded with stuff you can do, right? I can look at contains. I can do a lot of different functions to select my document, right? But I don't want to target my document. I want to target my transformer. Well, it's simply just done like this. I can go one of these. I can say target my transformer ID, right? The inner HTML, here it is, or it's actually my text, the text item of my ID, right? That's what this thing is, right? Or I can just say my headline, right, is a reference to my transformer object. Okay. Now I can do something like the same thing I did here, headline.innerHTML, or I can simply do something like this. Well, let's leave it like this first. Let's see if this works. This is my jQuery that replaces this big line. All right, so look at this big line that says document.getElementById. I can just do one of these. $sign for the jQuery, that's what it means. Hey jQuery, get a reference to my transformer. That's what it means. Really, really quick. And let's see if that works. So I'm going to run this thing, and if it works, right, we're going to see it work the same way. Right? Okay, now we got a problem. Right? Let's see if see this thing how it's still there. And if I click on it, nothing happens. Well, let's take a look and see what my problem is. So I'm going to go back down to here, into my More tools, and go into JavaScript Console. And if you look, here's my jQuery. and it says my jQuery function in it. And if I look through, I'm just going to pull this up for a second so we can see what this is. I can pull up my context. My document is my context, and my inner HTML is my new headline. Right? That's what it is. My inner HTML is my new headline. And my selector is my transformer. It's telling you what it's pulling it. So it actually connected it nicely. Now I didn't do any changes, right? In order for me to do changes, because I said headline is transformer, I could do something like this. So instead of it being new string, I could say something like this. My text then, right, of my headline is this new string, which is this. Let's see if that works. Instead of inner HTML, which doesn't mean anything to anybody. And now when I refresh, right, I see that my text is my new headline, right? Here it is. And now it's not replaced. It worked, but it's not replacing. It's not doing what I was supposed to do. It's not saying take my inner HTML, my p tag in my inner HTML and kill it. It's not doing that anymore, right? jQuery, what it does, it works similar to what we've been doing all this time. If I want to target my paragraph tag, right, the text of my paragraph tag, I need to say something like this. Transformer, paragraph tag, just like we normally would do in CSS, right? That's my new paragraph. This is what this thing is, right? We call it headline in this particular case, right? And I want to change it to my new headline here, my new string. Let's see if that works. All right, so refresh, and let's see what I get here, right? So I see that my selector is transformer P, my text is my new headline, right? That's my new text, except it's not switching this up. But as you can see how quick it is to select what might tell me what my selector is. Look, that's what it's telling me. I'm actually selecting my transformer P. That's what my selection is. Just like we would normally see in, so any paragraph that's inside my transformer is what this is saying. Anyways, the great thing is jQuery gives great functionality to some of this stuff here, right? We don't have to wait for things to load like we did before. Okay, one more thing. So now that we have jQuery, she's afraid to come in. Now that we have jQuery, right, in our code, again, I just replaced it here. I'm going to go back to my index.html, right? We can also add other functions. This is just one API, this jQuery API, Saeed's coming in. But we can add other ones, and we'll detail those maybe at a high level next week. But next week is really review. So that's it for me today. So jQuery and JavaScript at a very high level, we can add it to our page.